You'll see that he is the perfect candidate for the DEI agenda that the Democrats have and have been pushing for a long time. Ever since Obama, they've been very vocal about DEI, and you'll understand why Tim is the perfect candidate for them. It's either really going to work or backfire in their faces. This was announced yesterday, and I didn't know much about Tim Walz. I'll be truly honest with you guys. I did not know much about him. I did not know who that guy was. So I did a lot of research on Tim Walz this morning to get prepared for this. And before I go into my opinion of him, before I go into the type of policies that he's pushing, it's important that we look at what the left is pushing. And there's an interview that came out, it's not an interview, a report, if you will, by MSNBC. It came out yesterday, about 8 hours ago. So technically it came out this morning. And they go over a very good history of Tim Walz, what he used to believe in to what the type of person that he's become. I am not a fan of the woman that hosts this show, but it is crucial that we understand the type of views that they're pushing. We need to understand why they chose that guy, why they think that he's the best candidate, to be prepared to see what's going to come out of his mouth. And it's already started, right? Yesterday, he was already calling MAGAs weird and creepy.
I got to tell you, pointing out just an observation of mine that I made. I just have to say it. You know it, you feel it. These guys are creepy and, yes, just weird as hell. That's what you see. That's what you see.
He even said about J.D. Vance that if he can find the time to get off the couch, he'd like to debate him.
And I got to tell you, I can't wait to debate the guy. That is, if he's willing to get off the couch and show up. So, you see what I did there?
Let's listen to this video in order to get a really good idea of who Tim Walz is and why the left has chosen.
I'm Tim Walz. You know, growing up hunting taught me a lot about responsibility and respect, lessons I hope to pass on to my kids. I'm proud to stand with the NRA to protect the rights of sportsmen and gun owners.
That was Vice President Kamala Harris's new running mate, Tim Walz.
And up to now, it sounds good, right? Sounds like a guy that's pro-guns that will stand with the NRA. Up to now, sounds good, right?
Walz proudly declaring his support for the National Rifle Association in a radio ad in 2010. Now, that same year, not only did the NRA give Walz an A rating, the gun group endorsed Walz over his Republican challenger. In 2016, Guns and Ammo magazine named then Representative Walz as one of the top 20 politicians for gun owners.
Up to now, that actually sounds like a Republican. Is it me? Or up to now, if it wasn't on MSNBC, I would like, oh shit. How does a Republican get chosen by the most left-leaning candidate ever chosen by the Democrats?
Now hold all of that in your mind and listen to Walz's State of the State address as governor of Minnesota last year.
The time for hiding behind thoughts and prayers is long gone. What we need is action, and we need it now. So here's what's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen. We've got gun safety bill on the table, and we're going to get it passed. And I'm going to sign it.
Doesn't sound like somebody that's pro-gun anymore, does it?
1 month after that speech, Governor Walz did just that. He signed a bill creating a red flag law and expanding background checks for gun owners in Minnesota. Now, there are already plenty of articles online slamming Walz as a, quote, political chameleon or claiming that he made an epic flip-flop on guns. But that simply is not true. I mean,
actually, it's 100% true. Like, whatever she says, this is what we need to be careful about. When we're listening to somebody that is as biased as MSNBC, that will push any ideas from the DEI culture to Marxism, we need to be very careful about what we're listening to and put it into perspective. This is a flip-flop. They can say whatever the fuck they want. He went from being pro-gun to being endorsed by the NRA to passing laws restricting access to firearms.
This change for Walz has been more than a decade in the making.
If the question was, how do you get there? I've been open to it. I've listened. I've talked to people. I've watched people on both sides of this. But again, when I turn on my television like everybody else, and this is repeated again, and we're not doing anything about it, when I said I was open to it in 2012 to see what's happening, I've seen enough, like America. I've seen enough of this. I've seen enough of this carnage. I've seen enough of these things being a part of that. And I think now is the time.
It's pretty freaking refreshing. I mean, in the wake of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in 2012, a shooting that left 20 children and 6 adults dead. Walz was
This is pretty refreshing. You know what I find would be pretty refreshing? If we stop blaming inanimate object for the actions of human beings. Because guns don't kill people. People kill people, right?
sure what the answer was on how to address gun violence, but he told the press he wasn't willing to do nothing. Then after the Las Vegas shooting in 2017 killed nearly 60 people and hurt almost 500, Walz donated every penny he had ever received from the NRA to charity. In 2018, after the Parkland High School shooting killed 17 people and injured 17 more, Walz got a wake-up call on this issue from his own daughter, Hope.
Before I let this play, keep that in mind. You have an elected official that is taking advice from his daughter. That is not what we call parenting, is it? The parents are supposed to teach their children what they should believe in. And if they don't, try to explain to them why, as an adult, they chose to do certain things. You don't listen to your kids and change all of your policies from what they're telling you. It's the other way around. You need to explain to your children what is actually happening in a context that makes sense to them.
Hope woke up like many of you did 5 weeks ago and said, Dad, you're the only person I know who's in elected office. You need to stop what's happening with this. I'll take my kick in the butt for the NRA. I spent 25 years in the Army and I hunt.
So yeah, Walz's position on how we should address gun violence has changed. It was an evolution. And I bet a heck of a lot of Americans went through that same evolution with him.
This is where the lies are going to start coming. And the fact that he's saying that, that she's saying that a lot of Americans are thinking like him, I don't know any. I don't know any Americans that is pro-gun, that is changing their stance on guns because of what he's doing. Do you? That's a question for you. Do you know, as a pro-gun American, do you know people that change their minds into saying, let's blame guns for the problem. Let's not blame criminals. Let's make something happen. Let's put laws into place that has been proven to have no impact whatsoever on shootings.
And the willingness to acknowledge and change your view isn't a weakness in a leader. It's a strength.
I was one of the best shots in Congress, but in Minnesota, we believe in the Second Amendment, but we also believe in common sense gun violence laws.
Right then and there, you cannot have both. It's just like free speech. You either have free speech or you allow hate speech to dictate what you can and cannot say. You cannot, free speech is not a part of speech. It's 100% speech. It means that the government cannot censor you. That's what free speech is. The same thing goes for the Second Amendment. You either have the right to bear arms or you don't. There's no in between. Those are absolute values. So to say that I can be pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment, and at the same time be good with changing the Second Amendment makes no fucking sense. And this is why we need to be very, very careful about statements like this, because we need to look at it from a logical perspective and look at it when it comes from the law, when it comes to from a law standpoint. You either have free speech or you don't. You either have the rights to bear arms or you don't. So calling them, as we all know, they call them common sense gun laws. It's just a pretext to put restrictions on the guns that you can own.
That was Governor Tim Walz earlier tonight, referencing his strong record on passing gun safety laws in his state. That's just one of the reasons Walz is being called a Gen Z ally, along with his success passing abortion protections and legalizing marijuana and many other things too.
See here what they just said. Now they're starting to say that he's pro-abortion, and they're starting to say that he's in favor of passing laws for legalizing marijuana. So we really have a guy that started as an army vet that served for 24 years, went to Iraq twice, until 2019 was really concerned about veterans affairs, education, and healthcare. Now, since 2019, he's kind of shifted his ideology and now is looking at being a pro-abortion and, as well as you will see, an LGBTQ ally. Let's continue.
The first member of Gen Z elected to Congress had this to say about the pick. Tim Walz knows what it means to show the people that government can work for them. Florida Congressman Maxwell Frost joins me now. Great to see you. His evolution here, and I thought of you as I read more about this. He had an A rating with the NRA. A lot of things happened, including the Parkland shooting. And after that, he had a conversation with his daughter. He basically said, enough is enough. I know, obviously, the Parkland shooting was so impactful on your life. I was wondering how you think about that part of Tim Walz's story.
Before we go, did you see how she called it an evolution? But how is that an evolution? How is it to believe in pro-guns, to be pro-guns and believe in the Second Amendment? How is it an evolution to pushing cultural Marxism, to be able to tell people what they can and cannot own? This is a question you need to be very careful about. This is not an evolution. Taking advice from your daughter? Really? You're a fucking adult, bro. Your daughter should be taking advice from you, not the other way around. Your daughter is making decisions that are emotional without having the intelligence yet to understand what's actually happening. Gun violence is done because of sick people, mental health issues. If you look into the psychology of mass shooters, they're not healthy. Most of them, if not all of them, were on antidepressant. Do you think that it's a gun problem, or is it more likely to be a mental health problem? And this is the issue. And where it gets very interesting is 20 years ago, body dysmorphia or gender dysmorphia was regarded as a mental health issue that needed to be addressed. Now we have people like the next person that you're going to see on the screen right now when he starts talking, that's an LGBTQ community member, that are telling us that it's an evolution for a guy that used logical principles as to be pro Second Amendment to evolving into relying on his emotion to take away guns from law-abiding citizens. Because this is what's happening. The same people that were mentally ill 20 years ago are now running the asylum. We live in a time where the patients are running the asylum. We have people with mental health issues that are telling us how we should live our life instead of us telling them, you need to seek medical attention for this. We need to stop allowing them to tell us what to do, and us, just like they were children, tell them, you need help. Those are the steps you need to take, and let's stop with this insanity.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the question, Jen. And, the thing that gives me so much comfort in hearing his story is the fact that there are so many Americans who have the same story. There are so many people out there who are now voting for Democrats up and down the ballot. They are gun owners. They are people who have guns. They are people who saw shootings happen and heard from their kids and believed we have to do something about it, but for far too long didn't vote for the right people because the NRA and leaders told them it wasn't the right thing to do, that it was against their values and against their beliefs. But Tim Walz is showing us that that is a load of BS, right? That
type of message is going to continue. They're going to keep on telling us that children know better. Are you fucking kidding me? They're children. They don't know better. There's a good reason why they're not allowed to vote when they're 6 or 7 or 8 years old. This is why they cannot own guns before they're 18. This is why they can't drink when they're that young. That's why they can't drive cars when they're that young. Yet, Those are the people the Democrats are telling us we need to listen to.
Is complete that is a complete lie sold to us from the NRA, that you can be a gun owner, you can be someone who comes from gun culture and still believe in common sense gun reform. And here's the thing, the numbers prove it. Most Americans, over 90% of Americans, are for universal background checks. Most Republicans are for universal background checks. Most NRA members are for universal background checks. And so
where do those numbers come from? Because he's saying 90% of Americans are for universal background check. Really? Where do those fucking numbers come from? I've been doing research on this for more than 4 years. I have never seen those numbers before. He's also saying that most Republicans are for it. That's fucking bullshit yet again. And he's not mentioning any studies. He's not talking about actual research here. He's just throwing numbers out there that sounds very impressive without backing them up. 90% of Americans believe in universal background check. Really? Show me the study. Most Republican believe in universal background check? Really? Where do those studies come from?
So he represents people who have that same story, but here's the best part. He also represents what people can be. And right now, as we speak, there are tons of Americans, gun-owning Americans, who, again, want to make that decision to pull that lever to fill in that bubble for Kamala Harris and for Tim Walz, because they want to save lives, but they've been told it's the wrong thing to do. And what we want to tell people is exactly what Tim Walz saw. The NRA is not for everyday gun owners. They're for everyday gun manufacturers. They're not an advocacy group for gun owners. They are a lobbying front for the gun lobby to make more money.
This is what is going to happen more and more. So you got to be very careful about those type of interviews and what those people are saying, because they're making it sound like they're providing numbers which always work to sway people's ideas. When you hear that 90% of Americans are pro universal background check, oh shit, if I'm in the 10%, I'm not with the people. So you need to be very careful about what those people are saying, because they make up numbers. Those numbers don't exist. I have never seen those studies. There's no fucking way in hell that 90% of Americans are pro universal background check. So we need to be extremely, extremely careful when we hear. It's important that we listen to what those people say, because we need to be prepared. We need to actually understand what they want. And people like Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, what they want is what they call common sense gun laws. You'll see that term is going to start being pushed more and more, because now they have a VP that's a vet. So supposedly that guy is going to have a voice with veterans. So we got to be very careful what those laws actually mean, because now, instead of having a woman that has no clue what she's talking about, now they have a veteran that is not pro-gun anymore, that have, as they quoted, evolved from being pro-gun to being pro-common sense gun law.